I'm delighted to be seconding this bill, which I believe accelerates measures and improves existing housing policy at a time of national housing crisis. This bill will improve the cities and towns we live in. Above all, this bill will make a real difference to the thousands of people who desperately need homes, long-term decent homes to live out decent and ordinary lives. There is no doubt that we are in the midst of a catastrophic housing crisis. I was just reading about a family with a child with autism who are being evicted, and you can imagine the trauma in that family home tonight. Nationwide, there are families living in B&Bs, there are young people sofa surfing, there are men and women who have spent all their adult lives living in homeless hostels and emergency shelters that have become the only homes that such men and women know. At the end of December 2016, there were 7,148 men, women and children in emergency accommodation across the country. At the end of November 2016, there were 142 people without a place to sleep in Dublin City. Rough sleeping in Cork increased ninefold in the 4 years from 2011 to 2015, from 38 people to 345 people. Ordinary families, young children, single people, renters, people in mortgage arrears, people in the repossessions courts, people with the roof over them sold onto or by vulture funds or speculative landlords, people with mental health and addictions, children with autism, travellers and those wishing to leave congregated settings. These people are all in housing crisis. All need long-term homes and they need them now. This extraordinary housing crisis requires an extraordinary response. As Minister, you know and have demonstrated through the actions you have taken that we need to act swiftly and surely with measures that will kick-start the use of derelict and vacant sites. While I appreciate the good work done to date, in particularly Rebuilding Ireland plan, I believe we need to go further and to act faster. This bill addresses both dereliction in our towns and cities and the scandal of empty properties. As a policy intervention, our bill proposes 5 things. 1, to increase the derelict site levy from 3% to 5%. 2, to create a publicly accessible register of those derelict sites. 3, to restrict termination of tenancies in buy-to-let dwellings. 4, to remove the minimum size restriction for the vacant levy site. And 5, to bring the levy into effect sooner, by the end of 2017 instead of 2019. I believe these are clear, sensible proposals that will change how landowners view and treat derelict and vacant sites. Thousands of more people could be living in our cities and town centres if we tackled dereliction. When Dublin City Council audited vacant and derelict sites in central Dublin, they counted 282 sites making up 61 hectares of land. That's nearly 7 times the size of Stephen's Green. That is a huge area of unused land. Turning such sites into homes would go a long way in addressing homelessness in Dublin City and County. In a submission to the Oireachtas on housing and planning, Dr Lorcan Sir from DIT and others noted that vacancy rates are twice what they should be expected. In 2016, the census revealed that we have 100,098 358 vacant housing units. That's excluding holiday homes and derelict buildings. It's shocking to think that we have 7,000 people in emergency accommodation and almost 200,000 vacant houses. In the town where I grew up, on the main street in Macroom, there are 210 vacant properties according to the 2016 census, including the 6-bedded home that I grew up in on the main street because there was 10 of us in the family. That's a huge number of properties in a small town. These 210 houses could be homes for people waiting on the social housing waiting list. Dereliction is also having a big impact on the face and character of our towns and cities. We have buildings literally falling down, shop fronts rotting, empty spaces, eyesores. These sites have been forgotten about and completely abandoned. Our bill makes it clear that a local authority may use compulsory purchase orders to buy such vacant sites and in turn these into homes. There is a fantastic group of mostly young people in Cork City acting under the banner of Reimagine Cork, who have taken it upon themselves to clean up the derelict sites. They've created a mini park on Kyle Street and repainted shop fronts on the North Main Street. We shouldn't leave it up to volunteers to ensure that the character of our cities and towns are preserved. Owners need a push to use these sites. We need to remind owners of their responsibilities. We need to empower local authorities. We need to ensure there is an adequate penalty for leaving sites vacant. and derelict, and I believe our bill provides just that. Finally, we need to remind ourselves the impact this legislation will have on people. Over the course of the last year, there were over 2,500 children homeless living in emergency accommodation. These are children with no place to play. Minister, you have children yourself, and you know how children and every child should have a right and an ability to play. No place to call their own, moving from B&B to B&B, a young life stuck in limbo, compromising their education, well-being, mental health and life chances forever. All over the country we have empty sites without homes, homes without people and people without homes. The actions we have proposed in this bill will help change that. When I worked for Cork Simon, with local authority support and CAS funding, we bought up derelict sites in the city centre and turned them into lovely city centre flats. I often meet a man who made his home in one of those flats. This man was a victim of institutional abuse and was a street drinker. When I met him, he had stopped drinking after a near-death experience, but at that time his only home was the emergency shelter, and he'd been living there for 10 years. This lovely man is now sober. He's fit, he has a job and he has a home. I meet him occasionally on his bike doing ordinary things like going shopping for vegetables and fruit in the English market. This man's life has been turned around because he has a home of his own, and one of Cork's derelict sites has also been given a new life. I recently passed it, freshly painted, with the brass door knocker all shiny and polished. Unlike some of the other adjacent sites, dark, depressing and dangerous, vacant and derelict. Our bill will also give greater security to tenants living in buy-to-let properties. If a house was bought as a buy-to-let, then there should be no reason why a tenant should be affected if that property is sold to another investor. Up and down the country, families, couples and single people are being evicted simply because one investor has sold the property to another. Because of the impact of the housing crisis, home ownership has gone out of sight for many people in their 20s and 30s. My daughter is one of those who lives in fear because her landlord in Dublin is about to sell the property. That is no way for people to have to live. These people deserve more rental security, and this bill provides just that. To sum up, this bill will enhance and intensify housing policy and existing powers. It will improve the places and communities that people live in and will help end homelessness and have a real impact on people's life chances, like the man I told you about, like the child who has autism who is being evicted tonight, and even my lovely daughter. To help us get out of this unprecedented housing crisis, I urge my colleagues from all parties and none to take up these good ideas and support our bill. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Coffey, you have 8 minutes, Senator.
Margaret, and can I say at the outset, I do welcome the opportunity to again